With the upcoming release of the Toaplan collection by Retrobit, I've been focusing on some of those awesome games. A few weeks ago, it was a Tatsujin comparison where the PC Engine port won out against the Mega Drive, and we're at it again this week with Hellfire, another brutal classic. Both the PC Engine and the Mega Drive received ports of Hellfire, so we're going to compare them side by side with the arcade original as a reference. We'll take a look at the presentation, the gameplay, the graphics, the music, and see which port rules the underworld while the other burns in hell. And speaking of the Toaplan collection, have you pre-ordered yours yet? 4 amazing games in one package: Tatsujin, Hellfire, Zero Wing, and Fire Shark, a beautiful box set that will look gorgeous on your shelf while you use your EverDrive to actually play them. They even come with authenticity cards and scratch and sniff stickers that smell like jet fuel. And even an amazing vinyl for that record player that you don't own, so you can't listen to it anyway. And you can get yours now in my description link, so I can make absolutely nothing on it, because I'm not big enough for anyone to give a shit anyway. What'd you think, Timmy? Will Retrobit give me a commission on that ad? Oh, don't be mad. You deserved it for hitting me over the head with a frying pan. Anyone tell you look like Mum Ra sitting there all wrapped up? Okay. Ready for a kick-ass Hellfire comparison? Hit it. I'm going to tell you up front that my opinion on these ports differs quite a bit from other comparisons that I've seen online and on YouTube. In some cases, I found myself disagreeing completely with them, which is fine, as for the most part, these are opinion-based comparisons, especially when it comes to things like music and graphics. So I think you'll be getting a different perspective from me versus what you've seen elsewhere. So with that said, before we get technical, let's start with the presentation, as it's both short and sweet. Clearly the CD game is going to have the advantage. Not only does it have an intro and cutscenes throughout, but waifu galore. Because what's a PC Engine game without some added fan service, right? There you go. Don't zip that suit up too high. Just an inch now. And later, in the end sequence, spoiler alert, you have a surprisingly serious and touching end where one of them sacrifices herself. Glad it was the blonde though, as I prefer brunette, or blue hair anyway. Hey, not that kind of blue hair. I haven't visited the senior home in months, give me a break. Mega Drive is just no frills shooting. Winner on the presentation is PC Engine, not surprising. So with the waifu fantasy out of the way, let's get down to business with the graphics, as it's an area that really surprised me once I started looking at them side by side, versus the arcade original. I came into this with a bias toward the Mega Drive, as having played both before, it struck me as the more interesting port. But what I didn't expect was how much closer the PC Engine port mirrored the arcade, for better or worse. A big part of what drives many people's impressions is the first stage, and the Mega Drive version is a lot more interesting here. While it's different from the arcade, I personally feel that's in a good way. Background elements are more creative, and they even added this little dancing pixie here that I talked about in my top 5 Mega Drive shooters. A hidden dancing pixie? Automatic win in my book. And on the boss, this fast-scrolling background on the Sega gives it a more urgent feel, even if the PC Engine port is more arcade accurate. You'll also notice the larger, chunkier sprites on the Mega Drive, which more closely matches the arcade, especially on this boss, where it looks downright puny and plain on the PC Engine. But don't get your opinions whipped into a frenzy just yet, as things start to even out the farther you get into the game. On stage 2, you can see that the dithering on the Sega takes a toll on the sand textures and on the sky gradient, while the PC Engine looks pretty good. Then the Mega Drive takes a step up with the proper architecture in the background compared to it missing here on the PC Engine. Now, it's back to the PC Engine looking better, as the Mega Drive is a completely blank background with no stars at all. Odd indeed. There are areas like this one where the Mega Drive simply looks different, but also just as good in its own way. And on the boss, the PC Engine designers got lazy and didn't draw the snakes at the bottom of the sarcophagus, opting for a bunch of arches instead. Really? Stage 3 is another interesting one, as you can see how much closer the PC Engine port matches the arcade, with the colorful, alien globules, I guess, growing down from the vines. On the Mega Drive, it looks like they all withered away and died a millennia ago, and you're just late to the party. But the actual foreground and containers themselves look just fine. Despite some of these minor differences, I personally feel that the larger sprites and enemies on the Mega Drive give it a bit more of a next-gen look, I guess. On the PC Engine, this was an early, regular CD game, so no extra RAM boosts from a Super CD or an arcade card. Stage 4 showcases more parallax on the Mega Drive with the foliage layers, while the PC Engine version just adds them as part of the static background. Although you'll notice the coloring much more closely matches the arcade on the PC Engine port. Same here though on the Flying Piranha section, where the foliage layer is just missing. Another area that's important to point out is the extra sprite flicker on the PC Engine side when things get hectic. I've said this before, but I actually prefer flicker to slowdown, as it's easier to ignore versus actual slowdown that affects gameplay. Thankfully, the Mega Drive port suffers from little to none of either, and plays fast as it should without many hiccups. I'll delve into that more in the gameplay, where all three of these games are quite different, but wanted to briefly mention it here. And here's another example of the cool fast-scrolling background on the Mega Drive, giving this already brutal boss an even greater sense of urgency. These fish heads are a real pain in the ass, especially on the arcade original, which I'll talk about later too. The hardest boss in the game, far as I'm concerned. Again, look at how much closer the PC Engine matches the arcade original here on stage 5, both in color and design. And yet, the Mega Drive port still looks excellent just in its own way. In general, there are points where the Mega Drive port simply looks better to me, despite it being a departure from the arcade. If this were an arcade accuracy comparison, the PC Engine may have the edge, but from an overall aesthetics perspective, I don't fault the Sega port one bit. Although whenever I see plain backgrounds like this on the Mega Drive sections, it kinda just makes me scratch my head. The final stage is actually a nice little showcase for the PC Engine port. Not only does it look every bit as good as its Sega counterpart, but actually exceeds it in some respects. For starters, you'll notice the ships explode on the Mega Drive. Not so in the arcade, nor the PC Engine port, where they continue to float on the screen as an obstacle. That allows for areas with multiples of ships on the screen for both the arcade and PC Engine, but there's a much larger difference still in store. The next section on the Mega Drive is completely unique, with these large incoming missiles to dodge. Doesn't exist in the arcade, and while it looks cool, it's not super interesting from a gameplay perspective. In fact, an entire section from the arcade was cut from the Mega Drive, shown here along with the PC Engine version that also included it. This is a particularly tough gauntlet that I'll talk about later as well, and it's missing completely on the Mega Drive. Maybe it was removed for memory reasons, while the CD format on the PC Engine allowed them to fit it in. Whatever the case may be, the final boss is pretty similar all around, with very little difference at all between any of the versions. Of course, in all cases, the arcade port has the largest sprites and more animation. But it's surprising how well the ports were done. The PC Engine version especially surprised me, as I now have a much greater appreciation for what was done with it and matching up to the arcade original. I came into this expecting to clearly prefer the Mega Drive graphics, by a mile, given my old memory of the game, and that just wasn't the case. The PC Engine port really held its own the farther into the game that I progressed. That being said, when making an opinion-based decision like this, I don't like to overcomplicate things. Which game simply looks better? Despite the attempt at greater arcade accuracy on the PC Engine, the chunkier sprites of the Mega Drive port won me over. When porting a game, you have to take the capabilities of the console into account, and sometimes you can do more by changing things up to the strengths of that console, versus simply attempting to copy the original. That's how I feel about the Mega Drive here. There are portions of the PC Engine version that do look better, and as often is the case, it's superior in its color gradients and lack of dithering to compensate. But overall, the Sega port simply looks better. Sega wins the graphics portion of this battle. On to the music, and not only did I really enjoy this section, but it also made for an extremely hard choice, as my personal preference doesn't quite jive with what I feel might be the right choice, and others might disagree. The arcade original has some killer tunes, and the synth guitars almost seem tailor-made for the unique sound of the Mega Drive. Conversely, the PC Engine CD tracks are an arranged mix, which I normally don't like, kind of like R-Type Complete CD, where they took some amazing original tunes and just made them worse. Thing is, in the case of Hellfire, they handed the job over of remixing the tracks to T's music. Yes, that T's music of Lords of Thunder and Sapphire fame, so you know that they were going to be some kick-ass tracks. So take a listen to how well the Mega Drive tracks resemble the original arcade, and then take a listen to the masterpieces that T's music came up with, and tell me how hard it would be to pick a winner. Do you go for the faithful conversion or some incredible original work? If someone's a big fan of the original tracks and a stickler for accuracy, I can easily see them choosing the Mega Drive and wondering, why would it be changed? And I wouldn't blame them. In fact, it's really hard not to choose the Mega Drive outright for that reason. But I can also see someone new without any previous bias listening to both and choosing the really well done CD tracks, some of which are masterpieces. As a PC Engine nut, I'm a particular fan of T's music, so the choice here is pretty agonizing. So in cases like this, instead of trying to nitpick a winner, which is silly, I go for the obvious choice. The Mega Drive sounds as good as you could possibly expect, based on the original, and is very well done. But never, ever bet against T's music. Given the CD format and incredible arrangements, I'd play the PC Engine game just for the music alone, so I'm calling this one for the PC Engine. Clearly a matter of personal preference, but these tracks are truly excellent, and I prefer them to the well-done Mega Drive tunes. Winner, PC Engine. On to the gameplay, and where do I begin? All three of these games are very different from each other in how they play. One of them is unbalanced and way too easy, with random spikes in difficulty. The other, a legitimate tough challenge, but very beatable with proper practice. And the third, oof, it was so damn hard, you'd think they were doing testing for Tatsujin. So which one is which? You might be surprised. When it comes to gameplay, as you saw in my Tatsujin comparison, I'm all about maintaining the spirit of the original game, at least if it was good to begin with. Not only the difficulty, but the feel and the pacing. How does it feel to play? So which one does that best? To find out, you have to start with the arcade original, and holy hell does this game kick your ass. But it doesn't have checkpoints, you say. You respawn where you die, unlike the Mega Drive. It's gotta be easier, right? Bobby, I tell you what, anyone that says it's not by far the hardest of the three clearly hasn't played it through without simply credit feeding their way through the game. It respawns where you die instead of checkpoints, sure, and it's still by far the hardest, as instead of having an opportunity to acquire some power-ups again, you're simply thrust right back into a sea of crazy that's literally impossible to survive in without them. Absolutely a quarter muncher in that respect, and I can see why Toaplan chose to implement checkpoints on the Mega Drive. If you die in a mess like this, you're basically just going to keep dying over and over again until you clear through the section. Quite a few quarters poor, I might add. In fact, the original Japanese arcade release does have checkpoints, unlike the US ROM that I'm playing here, and it makes total sense, as it allows for an opportunity to recover from your death, as opposed to just being swarmed by enemies without any firepower. I'd say the original intent of the Japanese release makes more sense from a gameplay perspective, and something the Mega Drive port implements to its benefit, which I'll talk about later. And the fish heads? Oh my god, don't get me started. When I record for these videos, I save at the start of each level so I can practice it before playing through. But here, after being murdered by these goddamn things more times than I could count, I had to save a state and practice them exclusively for a solid half hour before I could go back and even have a shot at taking them down. This boss is without a doubt absolutely insane, and most likely revenge for my weekly sushi habit. I'll never look at my yellowtail roll the same way again.
Fish heads, eat them up, yum!
One more thing about the arcade that makes it so damn difficult is the limited fire rate of your weapon. Your vertical and diagonal weapon can only fire one beam at a time. Until that shot completes, you can't fire another. So unlike the console ports, forget about mashing the fire button. There's no point. You have to actually time your shots appropriately, strategically. You can memorize much of it, but the limited fire rate, some incredibly unpredictable boss fights, and the respawning works against you, as if you die in a bad spot, good luck not losing the rest of your lives right there. So how do the ports play by comparison? I'll get this out of the way first. The PC Engine port is by far the easiest, even criminally so in some respects. There are way too many dead sections where nothing is happening at all, and you have some bosses that die so unbelievably fast, there's practically no need to implement a strategy at all. Then out of nowhere, you'll get sections that will kick your ass almost to the level of the other games, like Stage 4, which isn't too different from the Mega Drive in terms of difficulty. Until the boss, that is, where the fish heads just die way too quickly before you can even have any fun. The final stage 6 is another example where the final gauntlet before the boss suddenly just kicks your ass near the level of the arcade out of nowhere. The problem is, nothing else in the game really prepared you for it. And again, the boss though just dies way too quickly. Now the gameplay isn't all bad, the control is tight, and the way your ship fires feels more close to the arcade. You also don't get some extras the Mega Drive port has, which is probably a good thing, as there's no need to make this game any easier than it already is. And while I'd like to recommend it for beginners, it really doesn't have a good progression. What it does have though is a 2-player mode, which the Mega Drive version lacks, so bonus there in that department. On the other hand, the Mega Drive port is legitimately hard, implementing checkpoints when you die and making it one of the tougher Mega Drive shooters out there. But as I mentioned earlier, the checkpoints almost work in your favor. Unlike the arcade, on the Mega Drive your shots here are completely different and your rate of fire is much faster. This one feature alone makes it completely surmountable and less of a beast than the arcade. And most importantly, it plays and feels more like the arcade. The mini bosses and bosses take more hits to kill, and the gameplay just has the feel of the original, to some degree. It feels like Toaplan made it just slightly more forgiving, knowing that you have checkpoints and there isn't a single section of the game that feels insurmountable without practice. Contrast that with the arcade, where some spots felt like a total toss-up for me. Even on the hard difficulty on the Mega Drive, it doesn't feel as unfair in most spots, mainly due to your increased firepower. Having a drone to help you kill some enemies and a shield to take a hit every now and then definitely doesn't hurt either. And a really cool addition exclusive to the Mega Drive is the color coding of your ship based on which of the 4 weapons you have selected, making it much easier to keep track. That's not to say that all is well. For starters, the 2-player mode is completely missing. Now, if that's not something you care about personally, there's still other missing sections as well, like on the final level, which makes it feel shorter and less interesting, as I really enjoy playing through that. But much like Tatsujin, where I chose the PC Engine version for having the more arcade-accurate gameplay, here I have to go with the Mega Drive. It's just a much more fun game to play, and feels in the spirit of the arcade, even on the default easy mode. By comparison, the PC Engine port is a snooze fest most of the way, punctuated with odd difficulty spikes to wake you up. If I'm going to grab this game to play, aside from wanting to hear some of those cool PC Engine tracks, I'm going to grab the Mega Drive version 9 times out of 10. It's simply a better game, at least in terms of actual gameplay, and that's all there is to it. It's not even close. Gameplay goes to the Mega Drive. So which one do I choose? For me, the choice is actually pretty obvious. This isn't a scenario where I just take which game won the most categories and simply pick a champion, especially in a close call like this one. While amazing music and more arcade-accurate graphics go a long way, the Sega port is no slouch in that department either. And the gameplay on the Mega Drive is so well done, so accurate in spirit and feel to the original arcade, that that's the game that I would pick up and play 9 times out of 10. Now your mileage may vary. For beginners, the PC Engine port is certainly worth picking up and playing, and enjoying that killer music while you're at it. But pound for pound, the Mega Drive port is the better game overall. Winner this week, the mighty Mega Drive. Have you been enjoying the comparison videos so far? Would you like me to continue the Toaplan games and feature Zeroing next time? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't seen my big giveaway video yet from last week, it's not too late. Check it out, comment the secret code, and get in on the action. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you might have suddenly noticed that an ad popped up while watching this video in particular, and that's because I just passed the threshold for channel monetization. That means that I too can now make a cool nickel for every video I release. In all seriousness though, this is all new to me, I'm just learning. So please bear with me while I figure out the best way to implement those. I was just joking around in the beginning with my fake ad, but once I really thought about it, wouldn't I rather talk about and promote actual games and products that I already love and enjoy versus just hawking random ads or making people watch them in my videos? Something to ponder. So if you're watching this, Retrobit, M2, and the like, and you want to get your product in front of the right audience, you may want to consider a generous donation to the gaming community. Now, if I don't like it, I'll politely decline, as I have no interest in hawking games that I personally don't like. But if I already love it, and I already talk about it, make videos about it, and I'm already getting people excited about it, offering up an early review copy that I can then give away to someone in our community might not be a bad investment on your part. If you enjoyed this kind of comparison video and you'd like to see more of them, I've already done a few others, Tatsujin, Airbuster, and Lords of Thunder, and I'm working on more. And you can check some of them out right here. And until then, smoke them if you got them. You look like you could use one.